Welcome to Sage and Fettle Ayurveda. I'm Angelina Fox, and today we're going to be talking about how to chop an onion. So I'm going to show you two ways today how to chop an onion. So a fine mince, and then also sort of a more coarse chop. And you can kind of decide how you want that to go in between, depending on what it is that you're planning on cooking. So you want to make sure that your onion is fully peeled, and you'll cut the onion in half. Okay, so when you cut the onion in half, you'll stand it up sort of on the root side so that it's a little bit flat. Okay, and kind of give it a little bit of a flat stance so where you can grab it easily. And you'll want to make sure that your hands are on either side of the knife as you cut down through the root. Okay, so you'll end up with two halves of the onion. Okay. So for our first chop, we're going to use this half of the onion. Okay, you'll turn the root part toward the heel of the hand that you're not holding the knife with. Okay, and then your fingers are going to come out. The heel of your hand, or sort of the palm, is going to come onto the top of the onion. You're going to take the knife and you're going to cut along sort of toward the root. You don't have to get all the way toward that end, but just as close as you are comfortable. Okay, so fingertips always up, right? You don't want to cut them down. So fingertips are always up and you're pushing through the heel of the hand. Okay, so once you get your slices across, we're going to do some chops down. Okay, so again, you can see that an onion generally has its own little grooves already. So if you're doing a fine mince, which we're going to do here first, you can follow as many of those as you want. So the more you follow, the finer your mince is going to be. So just cut along from the root toward this top, giving it a couple of chops, and you don't want to cut all the way to the stem, right? So we want to try to hold it together as much as we can. Okay? And then you'll have to rotate depending on always keeping your fingers away from the knife. Okay? And then once you get that cut, you're going to cut the tip off. And then you can either keep that to make a broth later, or you can toss it. If you compost, it would be a great thing to add to your compost. Okay, so you can see I've already got the little pieces starting to come apart there. And then when you chop, you always want to make sure that your fingers are tucked in so that they are away from the blade of the knife, right? So fingers come in. Scoot this over just a little bit. And we're going to chop down. So you always want to chop down and forward, down and forward. And then that way you make sure that you cut all the way through to the cutting board, right? So just slowly scooting the fingers back, the closer the knife gets to the fingers. Good. And then you don't want to be a hero, so don't get too close to your fingers. And then if you feel like you need to cut more of this stem, you're welcome to cut more of the stem. Or again, otherwise you can just cut the stem off all the way, toss that in the trash, and you can keep this piece, or you can cut it a little bit more. If you want to do some more mincing, you can keep this to make into a broth if you like, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to put it off to the side. Okay. All right, so I've got a pretty good mince, you can see already. So the pieces are already pretty small. So if you felt like you wanted to make them smaller, you would sort of group your onion into a pile. And again, fingers are always tucked in when we're holding something. But when we bring our hand to the top of the knife, it's similar when we had our hand on the top of the onion. The fingers all curl up, and you always want to have your thumb tucked in. Okay, so the hand comes to the top of the knife, and then you just keep the tip of the knife down and lift the knife up and down a few times and move it across. Right, and then eventually you'll need to wipe off the knife. Okay, and then repile. So I feel like for what I'm using this for, I have a pretty good sized chop here that I'm going to keep. So this is the minced, finely minced, or if you want to go a little bit finer, you can keep doing the chopping motion. I'm going to grab a bowl, and I'm going to pop that in a bowl. Great. And then we'll do our next one. Okay. So you never want to use the sharp edge of your knife to scrape along your cutting boards. You can always get a dough scraper actually, which is a nice thing to use to scrape things off of your cutting board. Okay, so put that off to the side. All right, so then this time we're gonna do sort of a larger chop, okay? So for the larger chop, we're just gonna chop the end off, the tip of it off just to begin with, because we don't need to keep it together as much, okay? So this chop is gonna be more for things like stews or soups where you wanna have, or curries where you wanna have like those bigger pieces of onion, right? So I'm actually not gonna slice it that horizontal way that we did when we were doing our mince. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a few. I'm also not gonna do as many along the side. Okay, but you always wanna move your fingers away from the knife and cut down and away from you. Okay, so you can see that it's just cut this way for right now. Okay. So I'm gonna cut it vertically or horizontally this way a few times, and those are going to make our chops. So we're gonna have those little bigger chunks of onion this time. Okay, perfect. So you can see this is kind of the sort of size we would want if we were making a curry or a stew or some sort of soup. If you feel like you get some pieces that maybe are a little bigger than is desirable for the dish that you're making, again, you can always make them a little bit smaller, but these sizes are really, they're just perfect for those kinds of dishes. So I hope this was helpful for you, and you can get more tips and kitchen tips and Ayurveda tips and information and tutorials at sageandfettle.com, or you can also join me there for a cooking class, and I hope to see you next time.